Okay. Looks like we're going live. My phone alarms are going off. All right. Happy Saturday, everybody. This is one of the few times I have the house to myself, and it might just be for a couple hours. But I wanted to just do my normal edits that I do for every episode. This one's going to be 100% narration, so it's going to be as far as skill goes, novice level, just playing with a multi-track editor. But I guess so. Today, as you can see, I've got the chat up here. So if you are logging in live and watching this, maybe you're on Patreon, you can go to the actual YouTube link and watch it on YouTube and chat with me if you'd like to say something in there. But yeah, I'm just going to get started here. All right, so last time I left off, I had my narration with all the mistakes, and I made a couple adjustments to the audio to make it sound a little better. But I'm going to create a new multi-track session. Season 4, Episode 15. The Imagination of a Child. Let's put this right in here. Folder I created last time. Okay. Here I'm going to, track 1 is going to be narration. Track 2, music. Track 3, maybe I'll do music 2, just in case I have overlapping stuff. And then FX, I usually create one of those as well. You can set this up with a template, but I kind of make different adjustments every time. All right. Now I've got to import some stuff here. Let's import. That's my WAV file. I need that. It's my narration. I also need my intro and music here. Where do I want to go? I think I put it in season 4, background music. Let's do intro and outro. That file is Rusty Quill Presents. And then where is Cody's music? Here we go. Usually I do like one of these. I'll stick with that. All right, so first and foremost here, let's get our file in here. Before I do anything like edit this, I like to right click, match clip loudness to -16 LUFS. Shouldn't change it too much since I already ran it through some processing. Well, I kind of did. Bumped it up a little. Despite witnessing someone entering Joseph. Yeah, see down here it's in the red clipping, so I might need to play around with that later. All right, let's get our intro V2 music. And then slide this over. Then I need my Rusty Quill Presents. All right, let's hear this. Oops, I meant to slide that over.
Rusty Quill presents The Storage Papers.
Just want to make sure you guys can hear my desktop. I'm looking at OBS real quick.
Quill presents The Storage.
Yeah, I'm seeing it pop up there. Perfect. So I said it 3 times. Don't really need that, but what I am going to do is fade into this music. See what that sounds like.
Rusty Quill presents The Storage Papers.
Here we go. here start fading out. And then, you know what I'm missing is my little tools up here. View. Huh. Where's my little tool selector thing? That's something I need to figure out how to put up there. That's all right. I can just use this. Ah, what happened? Should be able to delete. Yeah, there we go. Click off of that, back on it, delete. And then I think that's just where I said mic check. Check. All right, mic's working. All right, so let's pull this over here. Despite witnessing someone entering Joseph Foy's hotel room moments after Brienne left, too long of a pause, gonna take that out. Despite witnessing someone entering Joseph Foy's hotel room moments after Brienne left, I still felt a sense of trust in his motives. I think that should say distrust. No, oh no, it says trust. I get it. So here's the problem. I'm just going to say this real quick because I haven't read this since I wrote it, probably nearly a year ago now. So I might have these bumbling moments. Get back to the script. I'm just going to start over at 45 seconds here. Despite witnessing... All right. Decided to get rid of all that. So that's something I could have clipped out yesterday or Thursday when I did this. A lot of this is just going back and forth, listening to it over. Despite witnessing someone entering Joseph Foy's hotel room moments after Brienne left, I still felt a after Brienne left, I still felt a sense of trust in his motives, and it didn't even concern me enough to mention it. I considered it intuition, though I also admitted to myself that my contact with the Pyramidion may have helped me with a sense of discernment about these kinds of things. For example, I couldn't necessarily read her mind, but I just know... Get rid of that pause. Read her mind, but I just know that Brienne has pure intentions in her efforts to help me with the papers. Although I suppose she never gave me a reason not to trust her. I think I'm gonna... I was sure... Get rid of some of that space. Although I suppose she never gave me a reason not to trust her. I was sure about it. This is just one of the many things I've been getting used to ever since then. I have to wonder if these effects are going to be permanent, or if they'll dissipate over time. But then again, time seemed irrelevant when I was touching it. I'm leaning towards thinking it's not going to be a factor. My entire... So you start out with a file that's, I don't know, 30-something minutes. How long did we go? 27, probably almost 28 minutes there. And it might end up being 22 or something like that. I'm leaning towards thinking it's not going to be a factor. My entire outlook on the papers has changed now. Ever since the Pyramidion, I felt a reluctance to dive back into the papers. There's danger there, yet they beckon me. It's like I already know that continuing to pursue the podcast, looking into Hydra, and all the families and lives they've managed to damage, It's a more polarized direction for my life than where I'd like it to go. So while I'm sharing my own story as it happens now on the regular podcast episodes, I'm keeping the one-off stories about just get rid of that. Audition does this weird thing where it snaps to some of these major markers here that I don't like. Story as it happens now on the regular podcast episodes, I'm keeping the one-off stories about reports of local paranormal events to Patreon as kind of a side project. Does that sound weird? Regular podcast episodes. I'm keeping the one-off stories about reports of local paranormal events to Patreon as kind of a side project. My wife has been talking. Too long of a pause. Did I clip into that? My wife is. Yeah, that's. There. My wife has been talking about having more children, which I'm not opposed to. And this whole experience has made me appreciate the family I have, even if I never find out what happened to my parents. At the same time, though, I feel pulled toward the papers, unable to. Time, though. Huge pause. Don't need that long of a pause. At the same time, though, I feel pulled toward the papers. Let's get rid of that. I feel pulled toward the papers, unable to simply walk away and let Hydra continue to do whatever it is they're doing that once involved me. I need to make sure they can't do anything to my family. I heeded Joseph's advice about looking into Dr. Patel's case logs for Malcolm. I feel like this needs to... I need to put some music in here or something. Oops. Sorry. I hit the scroll wheel by mistake. I think I'm going to import some music here. Let's do... Now this is just kind of a... I don't know what you call it. Inquisitive type of thinking here. I forget. Here, I think I'm going to just import a few. I'm not sure if I'll use all these or not. Behind Your Shadow is good. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, let's do that. Kind of starts out really quiet. So I'm going to do one of these. Maybe fade in. Try that, see how that sounds. I need to make sure they can't do anything to my family. I heeded Joseph's advice. So this track, I've used it several times. You can see it gets louder here. I try to keep the background music around 30, minus 30 decibels or less. And it's going to bump up here, so I'll play with that once it gets there. I'm watching down here as it plays. I heeded Joseph's advice about looking into Dr. Patel's case logs for Malcolm. There were actually several documents included, most of them containing the label of the pentagram. What's interesting is most of the other Maker and Shepard files aren't nearly as thick as Malcolm's. This leads me to believe that he was either extremely... So what I can do too is mute this. I want to get these big peaks here and see where that's... But I'm also talking right over it as it does it. Actually, minus 27 doesn't sound too bad. Yeah, let's go back and just listen to that. I want it to sound consistent, so the only tricky part is this beginning where it kind of fades in. My family. I heeded Joseph's advice about looking into Dr. Patel's case logs for Malcolm. There were actually several documents included, most of them containing the label of the pentagram. What's interesting is most of the other Maker and Shepard files aren't nearly as thick as Malcolm's. This leads me to believe that he was either extremely gifted or somewhat of a troublemaker, or perhaps both. Thankfully, she filed the... I goofed. Thankfully, she filed these in what seems to be chronological order. Though sometimes I need to zoom in order to get a more precise clipping point. That's all I did there. You can zoom in using these plus or minus, or just grabbing this thing and stretching it. There are no dates on these documents, and they don't specify his age at the time. While Dr. Patel had some notes scattered throughout these documents, with an incredibly long note on the very top. That didn't sound right. Dr. Patel had some notes. While Dr. Patel... Is that right? Can always undo any of this at any time, so... Dr. Patel had some notes scattered throughout these documents, with an incredibly long note on the very top. She expressed in this note that she expressed in this... Oops. I double-clicked by mistake. Oh, I'm missing my tools here. Let's see. Panel group settings. Nope. Nope. How do I go back to multi-track? Track visibility. Shoot. Multi-track editor. There we go. With an incredibly long note on the very top. She expressed in this note, get rid of that. Very top. She expressed in this note that she only had access to a portion of Malcolm's medical and psychological information. The rest was above her clearance level. She references conversations between Malcolm and one of the Hydra psychologists at the time. She had a fascination with... A little too long of a pause. I'm going to take some of that out. One of the Hydra psychologists at the time. She had a fascination with the occult, and he... Oh. Should have just taken that from that point. At the time. He had a fascination with the occult in early childhood. They went so far as to provide him... I don't know why I keep getting hung up here. I'm going to increase the zoom. He had a fascination with the occult in early childhood. I made so many mistakes on this narration. He had a fascination with the occult in early childhood. They went so far as to horrible. This is why I don't do live reads. Early childhood. I know I keep saying that. They went so far as to provide him with literature to read. Books about witchcraft, spells, and demonology. They even even gave him a King James. Oops. Clip too much. Hells and demonology. They even gave him a King James version of the Bible. Patel expressed frustration in her notes at the lack of diligence on their methods. Patel expressed frustration in her notes at the lack of diligence in their methods. I said on their methods instead of in their methods. Patel expressed frustration in her notes at the lack. Adriana, hi. Thanks for joining. Of diligence in their methods. Hopefully this isn't too boring. That they never sought the source of his fascination with the supernatural. She maintained a theory that it all led back to his sister, Tabitha. Happy to answer any questions you have, but otherwise I'm just working through the process here. Her own interactions with Malcolm concluded that until the accident with his dog around the same time that... Oh, that's too big. Sorry, folks. I'm adjusting as I go here. For some reason my eyes aren't tracking. I don't know if it's like this light shining in my face or what. That's where during the narration I was adjusting font size. Where are we at here? She maintained a theory that it all led back to... Well, I'm glad you find it interesting. This is like the tedious portion that can be fun, but sometimes I dread. She maintained a theory that it all led back to his sister, Tabitha. Her own interactions with Malcolm concluded that until the accident with his dog around the same time that... Oh, that's too big. All right. So what I'm doing, I have this mark here where she maintained, and then I went during narration and I kind of adjusted the font size, and I was talking about it in here as I was recording. So I need to find where it says she maintained. I think it's right here. Her own interactions with... Oh. She maintained... Yeah. Her own... She maintained. So let's just get rid of all that. Kind of a pain, but necessary evil. Source of his fascination with the supernatural. She maintained a theory that it all led back to his sister, Tabitha. How long does it take to edit a whole episode? I'd say for every 15 minutes of audio. If it's just narration, maybe an hour. But when you start getting into multiple voices and sound effects, the editing alone could take a couple hours for every 15 minutes or more. If I just go through, like right now, what I've got is some windows up, like Freesound and Zapsplat for if or when, I need sound effects. I actually just search for them as I'm editing. So, if let's say a monster growls or something, and I'm at this point in the playhead, I'll stop the editing and go look. And sometimes it takes a little while to just find the appropriate, Foley, if I'm not making it myself. But then I also might add effects to it on the track here to make it sound a little more unique than the downloaded version. Give it some reverb, like if it's happening in a cave versus outside, there's some effects you'd have to add. So for each episode, I average maybe 30-minute episodes. I'd say 3 to 4 hours. This one's probably going to be a shorter one because it's mostly narration, though. Good question, though. Then their methods. That they never sought the source of his fascination with the supernatural. She maintained a theory that it all led back to his sister, Tabitha. Her own interactions with Malcolm concluded... I had a weird noise right here. So what I can do there... I gotta magnify that. It's weird, there's this little squeaky noise, and then I don't hear anything in this peak, but I'm gonna just delete it. I like the timing. That it all led back to his sister, Tabitha, I think. Her own interactions with... maybe I'll... Oops. if you notice, when I highlight like this and hit delete, if I move it, it moves both of these. So I don't want to do that. I just wanted to get this section and move it back further. Let's see, how long did you even start podcasting? Learning the process. I mean, I've been doing this since maybe 2014. Or no, I started my first podcast when I lived in North Carolina, which was 2008 maybe. But that was for an extra thing for a college class I was teaching. I was experimenting, like people didn't know what podcasts were at that point. And my students liked being able to listen to lectures on audio, so I started publishing them there. And then I started getting into like a interview podcast. I did a paranormal show called Deviatus, and it was way before paranormal podcasts were popular. There was a couple out there, but that was 2014. And then I started Storage Papers in 2019, my first audio drama where, you know, the editing's way more tedious for something like this. But yeah, it's 2019, so it's almost 4 years now. July will be 4 years. Insane. Tabitha. Her own interactions with Malcolm concluded that until the accident with his dog around the same time he made Tabitha go away, he had actually been a very normal child. Of course, normal in the psychological sense, not taking into account his abilities as a maker. His behaviors changed dramatically over those events. So I don't know, Adriana, did you catch the narration stream? His behaviors changed dramatically after those events, and if the Hydra doctors gave two shits, they would have noticed and documented a change in his demeanor whenever Tabitha's... Okay, so I didn't give myself much room in his demeanor whenever... How it says his demeanor whenever... So I need to zoom this up quite a bit because I started whenever right here pretty quickly. Whenever Tabitha... Pretty quickly after, so good thing we can zoom on the timeline. I'll zoom back out and play it back. Change in his demeanor whenever Tabitha's name had been mentioned. Oh, you didn't get to sit and watch too long. I mean, I'm basically just going through that initial recording now. I was saying at the end of that, sometimes like what I used to do was I would just go edit all my mistakes out of this audio file as one sitting, like a separate step, and then I'd send the audio file. So if I was participating in a audio drama where I was one character out of many and someone else was, you know, doing the mixing and mastering and all that stuff, that's how I would do it. But because it's just me, and I'm the one mixing and mastering, I'm just listening as I go and fixing along the way. That way, if I ever want to go back and do like a blooper reel, I'll still have the main file saved extra outside of this production in the multi-track editor here to account his abilities as a maker. His behaviors changed dramatically after those events. And if the Hydra doctors gave two shits, they would have noticed and documented a change in his demeanor whenever Tabitha's name had been mentioned. All right, so that sounds a little funky. I think the spacing and the wording here needs to be played with. Maybe just add a little bit like that. Oops. If I overlap it, it crossfades. I don't want that. A change in his demeanor whenever Tabitha's name had been mentioned. That sounds good. And they did mention it several times. Only they seemed to document Malcolm's increasing abilities at the time, only having an interest in that, instead of how Malcolm was actually handling the situation. Hydra's so evil. In some ways, her notes made her notes made her sound appalled at... Let's get rid of that. In some ways, her notes made her sound appalled at Malcolm's treatment, like she had a heart that wasn't made of cast iron. A little less pause. What did you used to teach back in 2014? I still teach. I have been teaching since 2005. My background is in medical imaging, radiography. So like any x-ray program, I actually have a whole YouTube channel for that where I put my course lessons on. I used to do more like social media stuff with it. That's called Topics in Radiography if you ever want to see me actually look professional. Some of the lectures feel a little dry, but like I swear I find them interesting. But yeah, I still teach classes, and that I'm doing online right now for in California we have a lot higher standards in radiation protection, so we have to have a fluoroscopic dedicated course, which is live X-ray, which a lot of people aren't aware about, or they aren't aware of that type of technology unless they have one of those types of exams. It's far more difficult than just pushing a button. But yeah, I could talk for hours on that. I won't bore you with that unless you're really interested. In some ways, her notes made her sound appalled at Malcolm's treatment, like she had a heart that wasn't made of cast iron. Patel's notes also indicated Malcolm produced a name during those early sessions. Malcolm had begun asking questions about a deity figure that he read about in some of the books he named. Dang it. Malcolm had begun I don't know what mistake I made there, but I said dang it, and then I started reading the same thing over. Maybe I'm just not paying enough attention now, but getting rid of it. Malcolm had begun asking questions about a deity figure that he read about in some of his books, named Insert Beep. Oh, that's where I had a vocal effect. I'm editing the name out in case it happens to be similar to demonic. So right here, I told myself, insert beep. Insert beep. And now I need a sound effect. I think Free Sound has one. If I just go to censorship beep, I don't know. I'm searching for. Let's hear with this one. Yeah, okay. So that's like really annoying and loud. Let me see what this one sounds like. That's a little lower. I'm going to download this one. You're an expert. I'll have to show you my spouse your X-ray lecture. It sounds exactly like something he'd like. Okay. Is he in medical field or imaging at all? All right, so I downloaded my effect. Now I have to import it. File, import. Downloads, generic sensor tone. So one of the other things I'll do is probably keep this page up. Most of everything on Free Sound is royalty free, but you have to pay attention to Creative Commons. This 0 license means, you know, I mean, you can click on this and look it up, but some of this stuff, it says 0. I don't think you actually have to attribute it, but I usually do anyways in the show notes. Let's see. He had EMT license, so explains enough. Yeah. I like EMTs. I actually hire a lot of people who have EMT experience who go through X-ray school. And I also have a, right now I'm in management, so I don't necessarily, you know, I'm not in the hospital doing exams myself, but I hire patient care assistants, nurses. You know, if somebody had an EMT license and they wanted to be like a CNA and they got their license for that, or if they wanted to be a patient care assistant, I hire those individuals as well. They have great experience. All right, so I don't need this entire thing to be beeped here. I just want to see how the volume is compared to speech on this.
Some of his books named.
That's probably about the duration I need. And it's not too loud, right? I didn't watch the decibels here. 27. Bring it down just a little more.
His books named. I'm editing the name out in case it happens to be similar to demonic entities.
I like how that sounds.
And going on the theory that stating its name may give it power.
And I don't want a big pause in here either. So one sound effect. Oops, I put it on the music 2 track. I'm going to put it on the effects track just for solidarity.
To demonic entities. And going on the theory that stating its name may give it power.
Sounds good to you. Awesome. Thank you. Sometimes I need feedback. You'd be surprised. Sometimes it's really hard to get feedback in real time. So this is a good advantage to streaming.
Name may give it power. Call me superstitious, I suppose. Malcolm's journaling took out...
Fuck, it's late, folks. Getting a little frustrated.
See, I'm just wondering, is this painful for you to watch? Because I know it's going to be a pain in the ass to edit later, which I'll also live stream. But,
yep.
Where did I start? Call me superstitious, I suppose. Malcolm's journal.
All right, the other thing I could do is put a M for marker. A little less pause on that last part. Ooh, let's look at that. I mean, from here. Oops, didn't mean to put that.
May give it power. Call me superstitious, I suppose.
Yeah,
Malcolm's.
I agree. Let's move the marker right there. And then I wonder when I stop talking.
I might do that a different day. All right. Damn it, I lost my place.
It's probably right here.
Malcolm's journal.
Yeah, there's Malcolm. So I can just go back to my marker. Delete that. Grab this and slide it over. Let's try that.
Superstitious, I suppose. Malcolm's journaling took a turn after he began speaking of this being. According to him, it began appearing to him in the night while he was alone, or at least he thought so initially, as he couldn't be certain.
Big gap there. I'm gonna delete. Sometimes, like, the way I speak and the way I stop, I already know what I need to do next, and I don't need to listen to everything, so that saves some time.
Or at least he thought so initially, as he couldn't be certain if he had been fully awake or if he'd been dreaming.
All right, so I know in the plot this is a good point to kind of fade out music and bring in something a little creepier. Let's just do that. I want to see what the next words are. I'm going to delete this marker too. I don't need that right now.
Dreaming. The way he described it was very similar to the way I had begun experiencing shadow figures in my home, peering at me around my bedroom door all that time ago when the Grinner stepped into my life.
So maybe enter some spooky music right here.
I paused my research of Patel's notes for a moment and took some time to look up this thing's name online. A lot of similarities.
Okay, I don't like this pause here.
A lot of similarities existed between this.
That's clipping so much. All right, I'm going to put a marker here. Here's what I'm going to do. In the beginning, I went to minus 16 LUFS for this whole thing. But because I've got so many splits, if I do that now, it's only going to apply it to the current highlighted split. So I want to come back to my current place for editing, which is why I put the marker. But what I can do is kind of open this up, click and drag the whole thing. The first part was fine. I wonder if I can match clip loudness. I want to go to minus 19. I'm just looking down here. It's getting way too into the red here. So that should bring it down a little bit. Let's play this part again where it was clipping.
I paused my research of Patel's notes for a moment.
It just started getting distorted in my mic here. I don't know, or in my headphones. I don't know if you could hear that, but I didn't like that. Sometimes when you export to like MP3 also, that effect becomes more exaggerated. Let's see. It's funny how you can find so many demonic names online these days. Yes, and I did base the character, the Grinner, off of an actual demon I was researching. Fun fact.
Paused my research of Patel's notes for a moment and took some time to look up this thing's name online. A lot of similarities existed between this...
Yeah, just right here. Watch the peak here.
A lot of similarities
I don't like that. All right, so that's at 618 or so. I'm gonna go back and play with that. I might add some compression, or not compression. I don't know. I got a few tools I can use for that later.
A lot of similarities.
Don't want to get too caught up in it right now.
Existed between this so-called God that Malcolm refers to in his journals and in Patel's documents. But there's also some distinguishable differences.
I forgot to add my music in all that chaos. Where was I going to add it?
Stepped into my life. I paused my research of Patel's notes for a moment and took some time to look up this thing's name online.
It is important to emphasize. Sounds good to you. Okay. Yeah, so what I'll do, I'm remembering 618. Once I export the MP3, I'll go back and listen to that. And, you know, if it is, you know, amplified by the compressed version of the file, then I'll have this to save and go back into. I need some music that is a little more sinister. Import file. Oh, gotta go back to Dropbox. Yeah, Jeremy definitely gets a little heated. Oops, what am I doing? Background music is what I need. And I like Cody's music, you know? Let me try this one. And this one. I don't know which one I'm going to use yet. That's more like the inquisitive. Jeremy's looking into history. So I like it for that. This one is more sinister. Maybe I'm going to use the eyelashes one. And this I have to drop down a little. See how that plays out. Is Cody still around the Discord here and there? Yeah, he is. He's just busy. He had to take on a job that required a significant amount of his free time. So he's still around. If you tag him in something, I'm sure he'll reply, but sometimes it might take him a few days. He's crazy busy right now.
Time to look up this thing's name online. A lot of similar.
All right, so right here, I think I like the volume level, but I want to have a little bit of pause as this music enters.
This thing's name online.
Also, this needs to be brought down more. It's coming up to like the -21. Oops, didn't mean to do that.
To look up this thing's name online. A lot of similarities existed between this so-called God that Malcolm refers to in his journals and in Patel's documents.
There we go.
But there's also some distinguishable differences.
It's amazing how adjusting this like 3 or 4 decibel levels will make an impact in how that comes across in the end product. So I get pretty picky when it comes to this, because a lot of our early reviews, said that the background effects and music were way too loud. And, going back and listening to them, I agree back then. And it's something that I've had to learn over the years. So anytime any podcaster will tell you, if you look at your work now and go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, and listen to that same stuff, you kind of cringe because you hear things now that your ears have gotten used to, that basically you couldn't pick up before. All right, we'll do less on the silence.
Look up this thing's name online.
Maybe bring it to right there.
Online. A lot of similarities existed between this so-called God that Malcolm refers to in his journals and in Patel's documents. But there's also some distinguishable differences.
I don't need this pause in here. Sometimes pauses are great for dramatic effect, but most of the time unnecessary.
And in Patel's documents, but there's also some distinguishable differences. I recall previously...
Again, another pause. Half the time, too, I need to remember when I'm narrating, my brain's thinking about several things, so I often intentionally pause between sentences, I might be reading that next line in my head, so I don't make as much of a mistake, but I still have to go back and edit pauses out.
Differences. I recall previously reading about this being commanding 30 legions of demons in hell.
Get rid of that one.
Being commanding 30 legions of demons in hell and being considered a higher ranking priest among those given authority to roam the earth. But as I looked further into it this time, I was focusing on differences between its description and what I personally...
All right, let's see. Gonna zoom in for this edit here. So if you notice, we're about 47 minutes in, and I'm doing a lot of talking too. Normally I don't do this, but 47 minutes in, and we're almost to 7 minutes of actual audio.
I was focusing on differences between its description and what I personally knew of the Grinner. This thing is...
Get rid of some of that dead space.
The Grinner. This thing is said to have certain powers or abilities. Shit, I forgot to silence my phone.
Let's see. I do think it's true about seeing here in progress over years. Getting stuck on a couple of yeah. I'd be lying if I said improvements haven't been made. And honestly, there's some stuff that I still need improvement on. It's a constant effort to learn and improve. But that's good, My brain stays active if I keep learning new things.
New of the Grinner. This thing is said to have certain powers or abilities that aren't traditional and don't...
Boy, I really messed this line up, didn't I?
New of the Grinner. This thing is said to have powers or abilities that aren't traditional in demonic lore. For instance...
Nathan's... you're bored out of your mind with this, I know.
For instance, there are historical references to various cultures... My God, I'm getting tongue-tied. There are
For instance... Wait, sorry guys. I hear my dog. One sec. Piper! Oh, you're here? Okay. Family just got home.
Traditional and demonic lore. For instance, there are historical references to various cultures worshiping it. There have been
I really goofed this.
For instance, There have been statues found across the world in Greece, South America, and Asia that bear its resemblance. There are even
Yeah, it was a mess recording this.
Resemblance. There are even hieroglyphs in Egypt that are similar.
Nathan, what are you working on right now? I know you got the one thing you shared with me. I swear less than you? Okay.
Bear its resemblance. There are even hieroglyphs in Egypt that are similar.
I think you need to share some of your bloopers so I can share with the group.
Are similar. Most show the appearance of a bipedal, extremely tall humanoid shape, but with the head of a bird. Some depictions have feathers all over, and there are some differences between human hands and talon-like claws. I still haven't run across anything saying this.
Yeah, edits. It's funny, like you might finish something and think everything's good to go, and then somebody else listens and they're like, maybe try this.
Talon-like claws. I still haven't run across anything saying this thing has anything resembling a large grin, but almost everything I could find about it on the internet.
All right, huge pause that wasn't needed there. That's an awkward pause too. You almost need no space between.
I could find about it on the internet says it's rumored to have the ability to bring people back from the dead.
I think that sounds good.
To anyone who...
Yes, more blooper reels from you, Nathan. Some people are gonna think that you don't make bloopers.
From the dead. To anyone who claims to have witnessed it in person, it could be summoned in the hopes that good fortune and protection would be offered. But it also only seems to appear to people who have experienced extreme loss or trauma. Some of the writings claim it has brought back...
Nathan, what do you think hearing this from your end? Do you think the volume on the background music is good?
Loss or trauma. Some of the writings claim it has brought the dead back to life. Is this what Malcolm was trying to accomplish? Is he still trying to find a new way to get Tabitha back?
Is he?
I looked through more of the documents that Dr. Patel had sent me, and I was able to find quite a bit more related to this deity.
Pretty low. Yeah, I'm kind of intentionally doing that though. I'm noticing, at least in Audition, if I go like above the minus 27 decibels here, I get feedback saying it's too loud in the MP3 exported file. There's my dog. Gotta love her. So yeah, I'm doing that. I'll listen back to it and adjust if needed once I get the MP3 version, but it's just something I've picked up, I think, doing this for a little while. That seems to be, I don't know, I guess it's all subjective.
And I was able to find quite a bit more related to this deity.
I think it's decibel. Yeah, it's labeled decibels right here. I've got the audio at, I started with minus 16, but LUFS, but then I changed it to minus 19. There were some sections that were peaking quite a bit. But again, that's one around 6 minutes and 18 seconds. I'm going to go back and listen to after I export.
A bit more related to this deity. One of the documents explained that Malcolm had fallen asleep while reading about this being when video footage captured it on the CCTV monitor.
All right, so I took a breath in here that I don't necessarily... I don't know, I'm going to try to remove it. Try that and see how that sounds.
About this being when video footage...
That's too short.
This being when video footage captured.
I don't know. I'll leave the breath in. Sometimes it's okay to have a breath in there, especially for long
Malcolm
sentences.
had fallen asleep while reading about this being when video footage captured it on the
I don't know. What's your opinion? Should I cut it out? When does the current season end? Honestly, I'd have to look at a calendar, but we have 20 episodes planned. Yeah, 20 episodes.
Being when video footage captured.
All right, I like how that sounds. And that doesn't really matter for loudness purpose. Decibels really only matters for making sure it doesn't clip by peaking at 0. Yeah, I don't know. That's the adjustment I made after receiving a complaint. And I was reactive. And I don't know. I think it was during the, what's it called? Phonic Fiction Fest. When I was working with that sound dude. Whoops, what am I doing? I lost a window here. That's why I'm going back and forth. -19 is fine too. Yeah, that was the weird thing. When I was at -16, it was going all the way up to 0. -19 still peaked a little, but it was going to -3. I don't know. Yeah, I did have a compressor. Maybe I need to tweak my compressor settings, because that was a thing that I did when I if I go to like effects or favorites, I created this Jeremy podcast favorite that adds, I think it was equalization, normalization, compression, and normalize again. Push the compressor harder to get the certain left targets. Yeah. So I'll play around with that another time. I think it might be, as long as I like the MP3 on this, I'll leave it for now, but it's on my list of things to do for sure.
Malcolm had fallen asleep while reading about this being when video footage captured it on the CCTV monitor after hours. There was a disk included in the file that I imagined might have some evidence.
Too long of a pause.
Disk included in the file that I imagined might have some evidence. Unfortunately, when I tried to insert it, When I tried to insert it into my DVD player, I wasn't able to view it. So I ordered an external USB CD player. I should say DVD. So I wasn't able to view it. So I ordered an external USB DVD player before I could get... Bloopers galore. So I
had a tough time with this line.
I wasn't able to view it. So I ordered an external... I wasn't able to view it. So I ordered an external USB DVD player before I could get into the files to check it out. It was exactly as I imagined.
My cadence puts you to sleep. Puts a lot of people to sleep.
The files to check it out. It was exactly as I imagined at the beginning. It was old footage.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that, because, I can't change it at this point. Maybe other projects?
Imagined at the beginning. It was old footage, and Malcolm looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. The quality was poor, and it was quite blurry. But I suppose they didn't have high-resolution security cameras back then. The camera looked like it was...
I'm going to go back a little bit here. Sorry, that phone alarm
imagined might have some evidence. Unfortunately, when I tried to insert it into my DVD player, I wasn't able to view it.
What's ASMR channel?
So I ordered an external USB DVD player before I could get into the files to check it out. It was exactly as I imagined at the beginning. It was old footage.
All right. So it was exactly as I imagined in the beginning. So now the character's starting to watch video footage of Malcolm. I'm going to get rid of this music and bring in the other music that I brought in with a little crossfade here. Audio sensory. Interesting. You know, I'm surprised I haven't heard of this. I'll have to look into that.
As I imagined at the beginning. It was old footage, and Malcolm looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. The quality was poor, and it was quite blurry, but I suppose they didn't have high-resolution security cameras back then. The camera looked like it was...
You'll have to send me an example. I'm still not quite sure what you mean.
It's fixed to a corner in the room, and you could see Malcolm sitting up reading. A few minutes go by, and you can see his head start nodding before he eventually gives up and lies down. The book's still open. A couple of minutes later, you could see Malcolm's mouth moving. I don't know what he's saying because there's no audio, but it appears to be repetitive.
I don't know what oddly satisfying is. Honestly, outside of podcasting, playing a few video games, I don't really get into too much. I'm sheltered.
There's no audio, but it appears to be repetitive. And then he stops and appears to be in a...
Yeah, so Malcolm, we want to say like mid-30s. Joseph Foy is actually his paternal grandfather. So we want to say like, I don't know, 70, around 70, plus or minus.
But it appears to be repetitive. And then he stops and appears to be in a pretty deep sleep. A couple more minutes go by, and you start to see what looks like smoke forming underneath the space under his doorway. Then the door opens. It's moving slowly, but there's nobody on the other side of the door pushing it. It's moving on its own. The smoke begins to form a...
Nathan's right.
Pillar just inside the doorway, stretching from floor to ceiling in a dark, thick cloud you can't see through, while Malcolm...
Mistake there.
See through, while Malcolm continues to sleep. You can see the light...
Too long of a pause.
You can see the lights in the hallway outside the door begin to flicker as tentacles of smoke stretch out from the main column. One goes towards Malcolm's desk on... goes towards Malcolm's desk on the opposite side of the room as his bed.
Don't start talking about food now. I know he was spinning like a rotisserie chicken, but I'm hungry.
It's his bed. Another goes towards a chest at the foot of his bed. Yet another goes for... Yet another... chest at the foot of his bed. Yet another goes toward the book lying next to Malcolm, and several more begin to sprout and examine the things in the room. Then they all rotate to the side of the smoke column nearest Malcolm and merge to form one large tentacle that makes its way toward him.
I love this eerie music here.
The end of it reaches Malcolm's face and spreads out, covering it entirely from the view of the camera. And just as smoothly as it's...
Mistake.
And just as smoothly as it's been moving the entire time, Malcolm's head becomes elevated off his pillow, followed by his shoulders and then his back. This smoke column is somehow lifting Malcolm up into the air.
Reminds me of Smoke Monster from Lost.
While he's sleeping.
Wait, I missed something here.
This smoke column is somehow lifting Malcolm up into the air.
While he's sleeping. Oops.
Come up into the air while he's sleeping.
What's that? Some kind of spike there. I don't know what that was, but we don't need it.
He's like this for a really long time. If I wasn't so astounded at what I was watching, I would have thought to myself sooner, if this is all on video surveillance, was anyone even watching? And why hasn't anyone gone in there to help him? Poor Malcolm. After what seemed like 5 whole minutes of watching this, the smoke column disappears and Malcolm falls back on his bed, but doesn't wake up. It's the weirdest looking thing I've seen in a while, including that video of the grinner from the hotel parking lot footage. I decided to slow the video down and look frame by frame. The smoke disappears first, and then Malcolm falls. But even more importantly, it only took 3 frames for it to entirely disappear. And it didn't just dissipate either.
Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
The first frame shows it moving away from the door and ceiling just a bit, shrinking in height. You can also see...
Don't know why such a long pause was there.
Shrinking in height. You can also see more of Malcolm's face in this frame, but it's partially obscured by some of the smoke. Advancing...
No, this is just cleanup
by some of the smoke. Advancing to the second frame shows the smoke column reduced to an odd-shaped mass, about the size of a basketball, but not symmetrical. The single tentacle leading from it to Malcolm's face split in 2, tapered down. Hold on, that's a weird sentence.
Yeah, I remember reading that and being like, what? Sometimes writing way before you narrate it makes you confused.
The single tentacle leading from it to Malcolm's face is split in 2, tapered down to smaller ones going into Malcolm's nostrils while he's still suspended in the air. By the third frame, the mass is gone, and just a billow of black smoke is seen, rather blurry, still going into his nose. The next frame shows Malcolm's body starting to drop down toward his bed.
So here's where it's kind of cool. It's this particular music track. It's just a loop, so I'm just copying. And before it fades out here, I'll just paste. It should sound pretty continuous.
Still going into his nose. The next frame shows Malcolm's body starting to drop down toward his bed. This thing went inside.
And I like the timing of the narration because it's almost like a pausing point where it does shift a little bit. There's more of a full rich sound. Oh, see you later. Thanks for hanging out. Let's see. See you in the Discord. There will be more to come.
This thing went inside Malcolm. I don't know if what I just witnessed is this supposed deity, the demon we've come to know as the Grinner, or something else entirely. That was the first of over 40 video clips contained on that DVD. And yes, I took the time to meticulously watch them all. After I did, I continued to read through a lot of Patel's additional documentation from... Oops. I continued... After I did, I continued to read through a lot of Patel's additional documentation from over the...
Just getting rid of blank space.
From over the following couple of years. All of the Hydra names are redacted from this paperwork, but it seems like they actually made efforts to learn more about this entity, which continued to manifest itself in Mount...
I don't like that pause. Get rid of some of that space there.
Efforts to learn more about this entity, which continued to manifest itself in Malcolm's room at night. Efforts were made to apprehend this being, or to at least get eyes on it in the first person by some of the Hydra Occult Studies team. Of course, the figure was not able to be apprehended, but the long...
Again, too much pause. I don't even mind the breath in there, but I want to get rid of the silence.
Not able to be apprehended, but the longer the surveillance...
Oh, I cut my breath off. Gotta at least make room for the breath.
Not able to be apprehended, but the longer the surveillance went...
Yeah, sounds good.
Surveillance went on, the more it started showing itself, and the more it began to take on different appearances.
If you're watching live and you haven't said anything in the chat, tell me hi so I see who's watching, if you're comfortable.
Began to take on different appearances. After going through the years of documentation included in that box, and after a several-year gap in documentation, only a few were included of Malcolm's from his mid-20s. Those few had Dr. Patel's name on them, and I suspect they're from her early interactions with him. They recalled Malcolm's continued interaction with the being, which Malcolm hadn't... Continued interaction with the being, which Malcolm hadn't initially been sure he had successfully summoned, versus something he manifested entirely on his own.
Big pause. Don't need.
Patel suspected the latter, since there was no specific proof, at least of a scientific basis or even historical resemblance of a deity Malcolm had been reading about in his childhood and had attempted to bring forth. Patel ultimately concluded that this being was a result of Malcolm's maker abilities, completely brought into existum.
Nice word.
His maker abilities, completely brought into existence by Malcolm's imagination. Over the years...
Too much space.
Malcolm's imagination. Over the years, Malcolm had developed a kind of relationship with it. He taught it things, had an inner dialogue with it, and nurtured it, until it began thinking its own thoughts and making its own decisions.
Scary.
Malcolm had been somewhat of an authority figure.
Can you imagine if that was actually possible?
For many years, until finally, one day, it decided it didn't want to do what Malcolm wanted it to do. It was a powerful being, and one that had superhuman abilities itself. It could read minds to an extent. It knew things that most people didn't, and it wasn't a demon or a deity of any kind. It was the product of Malcolm's imagination that had developed its own motives and intentions. It soon flourished outside Malcolm's authority and began venturing further into the world, using Malcolm for his own purpose.
The imagination is a dangerous thing.
Further into the world, using Malcolm for its own purposes, influencing his thoughts and actions to further influence other people, like the Order of the Divine Acolytes, a cult. It told Malcolm what to do, almost like a possession, and its influence was strong. Patel theorized it would leave Malcolm entirely to cause chaos, and she had been developing a plan with Hydra to contain it. She included a report. A lot of space. Can get rid of there. She included a report in her documents from the Department of Occult Studies within Hydra. She read it, but wasn't sure whether its conclusion.
All right, if you notice here, I'm getting close to the end of this. I'm going to start my crossfade a little sooner so that it's more of a gradual fade this time.
Were correct. And then right around the same...
I always do this little like grunt when I make a mistake right here. All right, Nathan, thanks for stopping by. I will catch up with you later, sir. Good luck on your edits.
Sure whether its conclusions were correct. And then right around the time she began seeing evidence that it was growing more and more powerful, that its physical independence from Malcolm was likely going to happen soon, she received a phone call from Malcolm saying it had already occurred and that he needed help. According to Patel's notes, she met him in a park in the middle of the night and found him lying down on a park bench, barely able to move and bleeding from the chest. He told her about this group of people who had lured him into a church to confront him. Malcolm claimed to have blacked out shortly after arriving, and
who is this group of people?
Blacked out shortly after arriving, and awoke when a man named...
I need to zoom in a little. It's not letting me. I guess that looks good.
Shortly after arriving, and awoke when a man named Jeremy had been using an ornate dagger to carve...
Who is this Jeremy fellow?
Jeremy had been using an ornate dagger to carve the Star of Cepheus into his chest.
That's the first time we've heard Star of Cepheus used. A specific reference, which has lore behind it outside of the podcast.
Dagger to carve the Star of Cepheus into his chest. He reported to Patel that this being, who we'd referred to as the Grinner, was no longer with him. Patel noted this event as further proof of her theory that Malcolm had brought the Grinner into existence with his Maker abilities, which meant he had initially failed in his summoning, his Maker abilities, which meant he had initially failed in summoning the being he thought would be the answer to his problems. There was one last page in the folder containing Malcolm's documents, and it just had a few scribbles on it. It was hardly legible, but it had my name on it.
Too long of a pause. Getting close to the end, folks.
It was hardly legible, but it had my name on it. Below my name, it had the word podcast. And then next to that, it had in capital letters and underlined, the storage papers.
Dun, dun, dun.
The very last marking on that page was a...
I'm going to try something here. This could sound cheesy, but what if I tried to amplify the eerie music? Sort of a dramatic effect. Oops. After it says that.
in capital letters and underlined, the storage papers.
Just goes up a little bit.
The very last marking on that page was a gigantic question mark.
I like it. I'm going to leave it.
I had a feeling that Dr. Patel may have had the same question that's been shuffling inside my mind this whole time reading this. The question that had me wondering for so long. If the Grinner we met in that church was something that Malcolm just brought into existence, based off of what he read about in the real entity, based off...
Come on, it's not letting me click on there.
Brought into existence based off of what he read about the real entity and not shit, that's a long...
All right, I don't understand. Hold on.
Based off of what he read...
Wait, is that where it started?
Based off...
Yeah.
Just brought into existence based off of what he read about the real entity and a lot of his own imagination, then the real one is still out there, and Malcolm is likely still trying to summon it. He's still trying to find Tabitha, and the only way he knows how to put...
And the only way...
Tabitha. And the only way he knows how is to pin... He's still trying to find Tabitha, and the only way he knows how is to pin his hopes to this deity.
Bad idea, dude.
He's kidnapping... I wonder if that's why he's kidnapping makers and shepherds. Either way, I know Patel was likely in on something with Malcolm, and I only wish she would have left me some kind of clue as to what he was going... Some kind of clue as to what was going on in her notes.
If only.
I still have more of them to sit.
All right. Let's fade this music out. Get rid of that.
Left me some kind of clue as to what was going on in her notes. I still have more of them to sift through, but at a glance, these are the main documents containing Malcolm's name.
Got a big click right here.
Malcolm's name.
I don't like that. Let's take a peek.
Name. Name, name, name. Name, 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 name. Name, name.
All right, so right there.
Containing Malcolm's name.
And then there's this guy right here. All right, that's fine. I'll get rid of that in a sec.
Containing Malcolm's name. Before I end this episode, I need to follow through on a promise containing Malcolm's name. Before I end this episode...
All right, I need more music here, just different, a little lighter hearted, but not too lighthearted. Import file. Let's do... I think behind your shadow. Now let's do We Will See You Soon. I've been using that one at the end, and I really like it. Kind of playing with Jeremy's medical drama here. Hence, these are the main documents containing Malcolm's name. Main documents containing Malcolm's name. Before I end this episode, I need to follow through on a promise I made to you all. I told you that I'd be following up with you regarding my neurology consultation, and after receiving the results of my MRI. It's kind of complicated, but I'll do the best I can. My neurologist basically said I have a tumor that's growing rapidly inside my brain. The MRI confirmed there's vasculature within the tumor, meaning it's growing with its own blood supply, which makes it very risky, if not impossible, to remove. Basically, if they go in to surgically remove it, there could be an Get rid of that mistake. And to surgically remove it, there could be an unrecoverable brain bleed. But there's the more mistakes. Bleed. But there's the irregular shape of it as well, which makes it seem like it has fingers extending into other regions of the brain. Like right now, grabbing your there's no reason to believe it has metastasized to other areas of my body. However, that risk is also high since it can easily travel via the bloodstream. I am supposed to have a repeat brain scan in about a month or so. I don't know exactly why I'm... Let's get rid of some space and that mistake. A month or so. I don't know exactly why I'm sharing all of these. Sorry, I'm spacing out here. I don't know exactly why I'm sharing all of this on the podcast, except that I started with this season. Oh my God. Except that I started. Let's see. I'm sharing all of this on the podcast, except. Let's try that. This on the podcast, except that I started this season with the intention of being more transparent with you all about some personal things. But I also don't feel too worried about this thing. You see, I've seen my death, witnessed it firsthand. The Pyramidians showed it to me. And I know for a fact that I don't die because of a brain tumor. The only thing that really concerns me now is why Malcolm claimed to know. Mistakeo. Concerns me now is why Malcolm claimed to know I was going to die soon. All right, let's stop. I guess that was the end. And then let's bring that music up a little. That might be too high. Is why Malcolm claimed to know I was going to die soon. All right, so here's something I kind of do. I don't necessarily always go and include the outro until later. When I do my initial narration. Sometimes I don't know what I'm going to say. All right, so what I'll do is save this project. Let's file, save. Yes. So that's saving. I need to create an outro. And I need to work on my show notes. So let's do both. If I look up here, here's what I want to do. So I've got like kind of a basic outline for my show notes and stuff. References to death. We talked about Tabitha. What else did we do? Content warnings. Wasn't too much. All this is copy that I always use. Transcripts. All that's good. Let's specify the music used. So intro V4. We did intro V2 on this one. We did behind your shadow. Eyelashes have left my head. We did needle mouth. I'm going to put the needle mouth one here. We will see you soon. We did not use with a flashlight. All right. And we did have a sound effect by Freesound. Because it's Creative Commons 0, I'll just show you. No copyright, meaning you can use this even for commercial purposes without asking for permission. So like I don't have to, yeah, they're waiving their rights under law. I don't even have to mention that here, but I like to do that anyways in the show notes, freesound.org, just so people know where I get. And the only thing I used was that that one little file that was like a censorship beep. All right, so there's the end of my narration. I've got my show notes. I'll copy and paste. I'm going to write an outro. I usually write one to serve as my narration. I always say, thank you for listening to the storage papers. I don't know why punctuation and capitalization is important to me right here. I think I want to mention more streaming on Patreon. If you haven't checked out our Patreon campaign yet, head over to patreon.com/GrunerMedia, where you can find various rewards for supporting the show. Oh, got a text. That's my Verizon bill thing. You may notice we are bumping up our streaming schedule on a much more frequent basis. In fact, I'm streaming to all the curators on Patreon right now as I not only write this outro, but record and mix it into the final audio file you're currently hearing. Is that too meta? As I not only write this outro to be recorded, I'll be streaming my narration of it into the final audio file you're currently hearing. Does that make sense? In fact, I'm streaming to all the curators on Patreon right now. I'm going to comma there. As I not only write as I am writing this outro. And oops. And will be streaming my narration of it into the final audio you are currently hearing. Only 5 more episodes left in season 4. But the bonus content on Patreon does continue between seasons. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode for the main feed. All right, that works. All right, so I'm just going to move this to another screen. I already saved this multi-track file. So what I'm going to do is close out of it. Just close all. And I'm going to do a new audio file. S4E15 outro is what I'll call it. And I'm already set up to record. Just get it where I can see it. I'll put it back on the screen. Thank you for listening to the Storage Papers. If you haven't checked out our Patreon campaign yet, head over to patreon.com/grinnermedia, where you can find various rewards for supporting the show. You may notice we are bumping up our streaming schedule on a much more frequent basis. In fact, I'm streaming to all the curators on Patreon right now, as I've written this outro, and will be streaming my narration of it into the final audio file you are currently hearing. Only 5 more episodes are... Only 5 more episodes are left in season 4, but the bonus content on Patreon does continue between seasons. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode for the main feed. So even in that short outro, I've got some mistakes here. So I think I'm going to do something a little different here with the audio. Instead of using that favorites option I did before, where I went Jeremy's podcast, I'm going to use a couple other things. Adobe Audition has a preset that I like called Radio Announcer Voice. So it has compression, equalization, and a hard limiter, meaning these spikes should not clip. I'm going to apply that. And then I'm not worrying about how tall those spikes are right now. Let me just play it before. Thank you for listening to... Oh, I'm hearing my family in the background here. Thank you for listening to the Storage Paper. I'll get rid of that later. Let's add that back on so you can hear the effect. Thank you for listening to the Storage Paper. So it's a more highly produced sound, which I think is appropriate for the outro. And I don't know if you noticed on the other file, it's the one I brought in is similar for the intro, the Rusty Quill Presents one. So I think I have that. I want to look at some of this noise and get rid of that. Effects, noise reduction. I want to capture the noise print. So it's analyzing this stuff here while I'm not speaking. And I select the whole file. Effects, noise reduction process. Apply, and it removes all that.
Thank you for listening to the Storage Papers. If you haven't checked out our Patreon campaign yet, head over to patreon.com/grinnermedia, where you can find various rewards for supporting the show. You may notice we are bumping up our streaming schedule on a much more frequent basis. In fact, I'm streaming to all the curators on Patreon right now, as I've written this outro, and will be streaming my narration of it into the final audio file you are currently hearing. Only 5 more currently hearing. Only 5 more episodes are left in season 4, but the bonus content on Patreon does continue between seasons.
A little bit of noise in there I'm going to get rid of. I can just highlight that section.
I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode for the main feed.
Like that. I think that's good. I'm just going to get rid of this. File. Save. Is that the right? Yeah. Save the outro there. Hit OK. Now let's close all this. Let's go back and open our multi-track session. I want this audition file here. And it's great because it loads it right back where I left off. So let's go open, grab our outro. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to import. Close. View multi-track editor. Import file. Outro. There we go. Let's throw that right there. You see how high those wave peaks are?
Thank you for listening to the Storage Papers.
Doesn't sound too bad, but what I'm going to go and do is match clip loudness, bring that to -16. I don't mind if it's a little louder than the other stuff. Let's hear this comparatively. Malcolm claimed to know I was going to die.
Thank you for listening to the Storage Papers. If you haven't checked out our Patreon campaign yet, head over to patreon.com/grinnermedia, where you can find various rewards for supporting the show. You may notice we are bumping up our streaming schedule on a much more frequent basis.
Sounding good.
In fact, I'm streaming to all the curators on Patreon right now, as I've written this outro, and will be streaming my narration of it into the final audio file you are currently hearing. Only 5 more episodes are left in season 4, but the bonus content on Patreon does continue between seasons. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode for the main feed.
All right, I like it. So I'll let that go on for a few seconds and fade it out.
Rusty Quill present.
Did not mean to do that. Let's go back here. Just meant to get rid of that. Just want to make sure it sounds okay on the fade out. All right, that looks good. I am going to save. Yes. And then what I will do is export. I have to export. If I save it as a WAV file or export it as a WAV file, it's going to be pretty high up on the file size. I always keep it MP3. I keep the sample type same so I don't get any weird effects there. Make sure I'm in the correct folder. I'm going to name this the same thing because once I export it, it'll have the .mp3 as an extension, so I'll know which file it is. Oops. What happened there? Save. Okay. All right. Oh, crap. This happens. This happens every once in a while. So here's what I think it could be. And if this doesn't work, I have another trick I can try. All those are green. I was thinking maybe it hadn't finished saving the multi-track version. I'm going to try this again. Export multi-track mix down. That's in the correct folder, MP3. Okay. No, why is it saying that? Bear with me, folks. That's wave. Not understanding why it's doing that. Let's delete this MP3 version. Delete everywhere. Let's try this again. Exporting, an error occurred. All right, here's a little shortcut. I don't know why Adobe's freaking glitchy. Like, it just gave me an update on this computer before I went streaming, and now it's removed all my shortcut tools here, which I was looking for at the beginning. So I need to figure out how to find those again. I just didn't want to do that on the stream. So let's try this. Let's export multi-track session. We save everything the same way it was, but I'm going to go to the desktop. And it should let me export just fine. Okay, that looks good. Let's minimize that. So here it is at the desktop. I'm just going to cut and paste. I don't know why it does that. I think it's like a little thing with Dropbox and or Adobe not liking saving to Dropbox sometimes. I don't know if anybody else has ever noticed that, but it's been annoying. So it looks good here. Got the green check. It's okay. Let's close the multi-track session. Close all. Let's do file, open. So I want to go back into the folder. Wave MP3. There's my MP3 version. I have one single audio file.
Rusty Quill presents The Storage Papers.
And what I'll do is, this is ID3 data. So like, you know how like if you're listening to music on Apple Play or something where you can actually see the episode art and there's a little description and copyright information, rather than looking like a file like this, it would have a thumbnail if I put artwork in there, and there would be more information here listed, which I think is, you know, iTunes and any of these other search engines. I mean, iTunes is a search engine. The more SEO friendly you can make something, the better. So I'm going to say, whoops, S4E15, The Imagination of a Child is the title of the episode. I always put just Jeremy Enfinger album, The Storage Papers. I'm not going to put episode art yet because Nathan hasn't created it yet. But in the comments, what I'll do is grab my little blurb from the show notes, teaser summary. And I can put that in here. I leave genre alone usually because that's music. Unless they've added stuff in here. I don't think they have. No, none of that is important. Composer, I'll just put my name again. Copyright, Grinner Media, LLC. HTTPS grinnermedia.com. I will save that. And you know what? Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to... Oh, I don't have any of these loaded. If I had a thumbnail, I'd put it. But I don't have any of those synced through Dropbox. That's why there's this like gray cloud looking thing. That's okay. I've saved it with all this stuff, which is really SEO friendly, was the purpose for doing this, so I'm not worried about it. Close all. I'm going to close out of this. Now, I'm going to upload it, the completed file for you folks on Patreon. Let's create audio. Select my file. There's the one. See, you can tell it's the MP3. If you hover over it, it says MP3, but it's got all the information here too. That's the audio file I'm going to put. S4E15, the imagination of a child. And then I'll go from this point down. Copy paste show notes. Looks good. Early access tag. Patrons only. $5 and above. Sometimes I edit this. I'm not going to do that today. 22-minute episode. Uploaded in less than 2 hours. Not horrible. Plus the hour or so it took to record it. But again, this was a narration, not a bunch of sound effects and other actors in there. Tomorrow's the 5th, yeah. I always set these for 2 a.m. Scheduled. Let's see. Maybe I will edit this. Jeremy gains insight into a familiar character's origins after looking further into Dr. Patel's. Don't you ever make the mistake of not using doctor in front of a doctor. There, little teaser. All right. Schedule. That is scheduled for 2 a.m. tomorrow. The other thing I'll do, I go to Acast. This is where I'll upload it to Rusty Quill's server. I'm not showing anything that's going to be trade secrets here. This is just the upload process. I figure I might as well include this. And see, I can change the cover art here. S4E15. The imagination of a child. Some of this gets a little repetitive. Oops. 15. That's a full episode. I've still got my show notes copied. Sometimes from Google Docs, it doesn't keep the formatting with spaces in there. I'll leave that. Yes, explicit language. I don't want to get shut down. Publish date. Main feed goes out on Tuesdays at 0200 Pacific time. All right, that's being encoded. So I have to wait for this because what I'll typically do is it's already set up in the account for a pre-roll and post-roll ads, dynamic ads to be inserted. Once this waveform appears for my audio file, I need to go opt in for a mid-roll ad. There it goes. So I have to actually go in and activate, and that just randomly throws it up there. But what I like to do is kind of pick a spot around the halfway point. Let's play that. It was exactly as I imagined at the beginning. I have a music switch over there, which is a perfect spot. That's at 8:48. It's a little early, but and then what it'll do is if I play it back, it'll give this little chimey sound where the ad comes in. And I like to do that during silence. It was exactly as I imagined at the beginning. There's the ad. It was old footage, and I love it. Save and schedule. That is it, folks. That one's ready to come out. The only thing I need to do is go update episode art. And I am uploading things to Apple right now, Apple Podcasts, specifically for their they have bonus stuff, and I'm not doing bonus episodes, but I'm doing ad-free content there. But that's a whole other step, and there's some of that I can't show you, unfortunately. But all right, I think that's it. What else? Am I missing anything? Let's go to webcam view here.